Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines, your window into relationship, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines. This is a trauma-informed leadership series episode, and I'm your host, Krista Fee, and I can't wait to chat with you about the power of many. How ordinary people create extraordinary change. Let's go beyond the lone actor. We've spent a lot of time in this series talking about the power of one, the courage that it takes to act when everyone else is silent, the way that a single spark can disrupt paralysis. But today we're going to talk about what happens next, because sparks by themselves are fragile. They flare up, they inspire, but without fuel and without others to carry them, they fade. Movements don't endure because of lone heroes. They endure because ordinary people decide to act together. This is the power of many. That shift from I to we. And if trauma isolates, convinces us that we're alone in our suffering, or that we're powerless against systems, then healing and resilience emerge most powerfully in community. Let's talk about the science of collective action. Humans are wired for belonging. Social identity theory tells us that people derive not only meaning but courage from the groups that they belong to. And the pronoun shift matters. Alone, courage feels costly. Together, courage feels possible. Albert Bandura's research on collective efficacy showed that groups with a shared belief in their ability to act accomplish far more than individuals, even if those individuals are highly skilled. In other words, one firefighter might feel powerless facing a huge wildfire, but when they see a line of engines, water crews, and air support, that belief transforms to, we can do this together. And trauma science confirms the same principle. Trauma narrows and isolates, but collective experience expands. That's why marches, vigils, and community rituals are so powerful. They regulate the nervous system, they restore voice, and they remind people that they are not alone. The power of many doesn't erase the immeasurable importance of individuals. Instead, it multiplies their strength. One voice might be dismissed, but a chorus likely won't be. Let's talk about some stories throughout history that are examples of the many at work. The abolitionist movement. We remember Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman, but the movement to end slavery wasn't held up by their shoulders alone. It was sustained by ordinary preachers who risked their pulpits, families who opened their homes along the Underground Railroad, writers who circulated pamphlets that challenged the conscience of a nation. Douglass's oratory mattered. Tubman's rescues mattered, but the power lay in thousands of anonymous people choosing courage together. Or Susan B. Anthony and Emmeline Pankhurst. Those are the names etched in history associated with the suffrage movement. But votes for women were won because ordinary women marched, endured jail, and went on hunger strikes. Black suffragists like Ida B. Wells pressed forward even when excluded from their white counterparts' marches. The victory wasn't a single woman's. It was the cumulative sacrifice of thousands. And we often tell this story as if Martin Luther King Jr. alone carried the civil rights movement. But King himself resisted that myth. Ella Baker worked quietly behind the scenes, insisting that strong people don't need strong leaders. Fannie Lou Hamer stood at the Democratic National Convention declaring, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Students in SNCC staged sit-ins and freedom rides. The power wasn't just in one charismatic preacher. It was in the many who linked arms and faced down brutality together. Lech Walesa is remembered as a leader associated with solidarity in Poland. But what made the communist regime tremble was the sight of entire shipyards of workers that stood together, and they refused to back down. The power of many turned individual protest into revolution. And in our own time, think of community disaster response. When floods hit, when wildfires rage, when earthquakes strike, it isn't just institutions that save lives. It's neighbors pulling neighbors out of the water. It's volunteers distributing food when supply chains are broken. It's teams of trained and untrained citizens stepping into the breach. And I've seen it with my own eyes through Battle to Be's Rise Up Rapid Response Team. Resilience is never just institutional, it's communal. Let's pause for a cautionary note on the fragility of over-reliance on the one. Because the opposite of the power of many is the myth of the lone hero. And that myth is extremely dangerous. When movements rely too heavily on one person, they collapse if that person falters, or dies, or is discredited. We've seen revolutions unravel when charismatic leaders are removed. We've seen nonprofits implode after a founder steps aside without a succession plan. We've seen communities traumatized when a leader betrays them, leaving people feeling abandoned all over again. The trauma-informed truth is this: over-reliance on one is not only unsustainable, it's unsafe. It leaves both the leader and the followers vulnerable. Real resilience requires multiplication. I want to bring this closer to the front lines. When I think about crisis response, the moments when everything is chaos and lives are literally hanging in the balance. I've seen the power of many make the impossible possible. I've stood in floodwaters searching for the lost. One rescuer by themselves can only search a few blocks, but a community organized into pods can comb entire neighborhoods. The difference is staggering, not just in numbers, but in morale. Alone, exhaustion and despair will set in quickly, but together, united, hope sustains. And I've worked alongside people bringing lost children home from trafficking situations. It's never one hero with a flashlight storming the darkness. It's the collaboration of investigators, advocates, shelters, law enforcement, and communities who open their doors. One person may open the way, but it takes many to bring a child fully home. And I've stood in the aftermath of tragedy after the death of friends, family, followers. I've seen communities gather not just in grief, but in unity. And if we think about the aftermath of 9/11, where strangers were holding candles together in city streets, firefighters climbing over rubble side by side, neighbors checking in on neighbors, the pain was immense, but so was the solidarity. That's the power of many. In chaos, togetherness is the antidote to despair. So here's some tactical strategies for multiplying power. The power of many doesn't just happen by accident. Leaders have to cultivate it. So here are those trauma-informed strategies for multiplying leadership. First, equip others through mentorship. Movements fail when knowledge is hoarded. Strong leaders train others, share their process, and invite emerging voices into responsibility. 2, distribute responsibility. If every decision has to pass through one person, burnout is inevitable. Leaders practicing the power of many establish pods, committees, and distributed roles so that no one person is indispensable. 3, create rituals of belonging. Shared songs, meals, commemorations, or even simple practices like check-ins before meeting become the glue that binds people together. Ritual is how I becomes we. 4, listen laterally, not just downward. True leaders don't just talk top down. They create peer-to-peer networks and make space for dissent. Remember, strong people don't need strong leaders. They need strong communities. 5. Protect integrity from drift. As groups grow, outside forces will try to co-opt them, or factions will splinter. Trauma-informed leaders revisit the mission often. What must never change? What is our North Star? They guard values fiercely because betrayal of values cuts deeper for communities already carrying wounds. Healing through collective leadership. Trauma isolates. It convinces people their voice doesn't matter. But collective leadership heals. It restores agency by inviting people into responsibility, voice, and action. And I've seen survivors of violence become leaders in advocacy groups. Their wounds transformed into weapons of hope. I've seen first responders burned out from isolation find renewal in peer-led teams. I've seen communities devastated by disaster rise not because of one charismatic figure, but because many chose to carry the load together. As the African proverb reminds us, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The power of one still matters. It breaks the silence. It starts the fire. But lasting transformation, the kind that changes history, the kind that heals trauma, requires the power of many. It's not the lone hero who saves the ocean, it's the many, walking the shore side by side, each lifting starfish, each proving that ordinary people acting together can create extraordinary change. And as always, I leave you with this reminder. I may only be able to save one starfish at a time, but together we can save them all. I may be just a single drop in the ocean, but together we become a tidal wave of change. Rise up out of the ashes of your experiences and live and lead your life on fire. And I can't wait to connect with you and see how Rise Up can transform your life, family, organization, or community. Book your complimentary consultation now or make a tax-deductible donation to our 501c3 nonprofit Battle to Be right now at battle2be.org. BATTLE, the number 2, BE.org.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement today.